This is phenomenal weather. Really, really bad. Very stormy, very overcast, and absolutely fantastic. I love this kind of weather. Well, the weather is really, really horrendous. It's pretty terrible. Typically not really the ideal type of weather for landscape photography. However, it is high tide, or it's coming up to high tide on the northeast coast. And I'm around 30 minutes away from Saltburn, and having had a look on the webcams, it looks like there's some big waves coming in with a bit of backwind that are pushing them in as well, and giving some nice breakers, which are going to have quite a nice effect when they're hitting the pier. And I've always been a fan of kind of poor weather, harsh weather kind of photography. So let's have a ride down, let's see what we can get. We're on the A19, and the cloud generally is just completely and utterly flat, and that's pretty terrible for landscape photography. There's no interest in the sky whatsoever. However, there is a little break in the cloud at the point of the horizon, just over to the east of where I am. Now, if that's replicated at Saltburn, that's going to work quite well, because we should get the sun dipping down just as it's about to go under the horizon and actually reflecting a little bit of light just onto the underside of that cloud. And the cloud's low, it's low cloud, so that's going to put a little bit of light back onto the waves, and once again we should be able to get something reasonable if that is the case. Of course, you can never guarantee anything with landscape photography. And because it's absolutely and utterly throwing it down here, you know, it really is raining very hard. The reality is that I'm probably not going to use any filters. I'm going to keep the 20-40-70 f2.8 on there, keep that big lens hood on, and let's actually see what we can do, just getting a couple of exposure blends in place. If the light's not there, if the cloud has no breaks in it, we are going to have to see what we can do to still pull a few images off. And there should be plenty of detail within those waves, so the reality is that I'm already kind of thinking, well, maybe I crop a lot of the sky out, maybe I start to look at some kind of letterbox format, maybe I fill the foreground with a lot of those waves and those breakers. We'll try some different shutter speeds to try and get different effects with the water, and hopefully still come away with something that's okay. Literally within a few miles, the weather's totally changed. It's still raining, but there's lots of clear sky up there, which is actually not really what we were looking for. We're still about 10 miles away, and there's still big storm clouds behind us. So let's carry on driving and see what we get when we get there. It's difficult to imagine where the clouds are at the moment. I'm about half a mile away from the pier at Saltburn. But I've got a rough idea, and there's plenty of light in the sky. I really need to get in position very quickly though. The weather has changed literally mile by mile over the past few miles, and that's landscape photography for you. You can never really second guess exactly what it's going to do and how it's going to be when you get there. I'm just at the top of the hill coming into Saltburn, and it's quite a steep hill down, and it gives you the view over the bay, over the pier, over the beach. And as I say, high tide, we should have plenty of waves breaking in. There does seem to be a little bit of wind down here, which is good. And you're about to get to see a view now, so I'll give you a second. Oh yes. You could do it to drop me back off up here in a second. Oh yes. difficult to shield the camera from this wind, so I'm trying to tuck my hood around the side to protect from the direction that the wind's coming in. And I'm shooting at f9, ISO 100. It's cold, very cold. I'm at half a second at f9 here. I'm trying to use as much of my body as I can to shield, because you can see the wind that's coming in, it's really very strong. I'm going to take a quick walk with the tripod just out onto the pier. Give me a second to plug the tripod down. I think we're probably going to get far too much sea spray. But it's going to be a very simple composition, straight up and over the pier. It's whether or not we can actually keep the lens clear. Quite difficult. Let's give it a go. I've spread the tripod legs as wide as I can. The wood on the pier is very slippy. And I'm going to try and shield the camera again. The wind's coming from here. And I need to try and keep this camera as steady as possible, so using my body as a windbreak. Few shots to make sure. Let's have a walk a little bit further out onto the pier and just take a record shot pointing back and maybe take it straight into the wind. We're going to have to wipe that lens clean again. We're getting lots of spray. This is phenomenal weather. Really, really bad. Really windy and very stormy, very overcast, and absolutely fantastic. I love this kind of weather. Look at this. Look. Hopefully you can see the amount of spray on the lens here. It's really difficult. We've got the wide angle 17 to 40 on, and it's very, very difficult to keep this clean. Firing through a fair few shots here, very quickly. Again to shield the camera, step it away, and hopefully I'm amongst those, we've got a couple of usable images. Gonna have a little look from halfway up the hill here. I'm just gonna dive out, try and take a few shots looking back down there. Come around this corner. It's really, it's a lot drier in the car, but it's also really dark now. The light's just dipped off massively in the past few minutes. Turn right here. We've just come up to the top of the hill. We're going to try and take one last shot, which is going to have to be relatively long exposure, straight down there. Overlooking the whole scene, overlooking the pier and the cable cars. Let's see what we can get. So we're at the top of the hill in Saltburn. It's still really quite windy. There's a little bit of shelter just where I am, but not where I'm going to be. Let's have a little look, see what we can get. Come around this side, because it's a little bit more sheltered. We've got this building here providing a bit of shelter, which is coming from over there. We've got some lovely lighting here running down, and then the contrast of the sea. I'm going to take a few shots at f9. These are going to be around 13 seconds. And that tripod's really moving around still a little bit. So I'm going to have to take a few, boost the ISO a little bit to try and get some definite sharp shots. I love this. I'm going to take this, it's around a 4-second exposure, keeping my hand on the tripod to try and make sure that we're getting something somewhere near. I'm also standing in close to it to brace the tripod slightly. So as I've just mentioned, I'm standing close into the tripod again, just resting my hand on there. I'm trying to brace the tripod against the fence. It should take a second. There's a shot, and there's a tripod braced against the fence. Any object that you can use to brace your camera against, the tripod against, when it's really windy, is going to certainly help to ensure that you're getting sharp shots. Now a couple of these, for some reason the light's changed again slightly and we've become a touch overexposed. Take a quick look at this in a portrait format. Now we had a lot of tripod movement there. Just going to have to hold. I'm going to try and actually hard. It's about an inch for here. Too cold. It's time to go and warm up. Well, we're back inside the car, and it's nice to say that it's warm. I didn't expect it to be anything like it was. The weather a mile away was clearing up really quite nicely. Not that I really wanted that for these shots, but it certainly was nowhere near as cold and as stormy where we were when we set off. Certainly even approaching here, I really made a schoolboy error. I really should have brought a slightly different jacket and also some gloves. My hands are now really cold, so that's a lesson that I usually tell people to do, is always make sure you've got some gloves. If your hands are cold, it's really difficult to operate the camera, and out on that pier that certainly was the case. Another good tip for you guys as well is I am absolutely drenched. At one stage I was in the sea a little bit, and then obviously with the driving rain on the pier I've become completely drenched. Didn't have waterproof trousers on as this was just a short trip, but I do always keep a spare pair of trousers or tracksuit bottoms in the car, and that's effectively what I'm going to do shortly, is change into those. So that's another important tip. Always try and make sure that you're comfortable on the return journey. Ultimately you're driving, and you don't want anything that's going to really affect your concentration. I'm going to try and get this camera cleaned up a little bit now and make sure all the gear's okay. I do think that I may well have trashed another trigger release, because that certainly took a little bit of water when the tide was coming in. But fortunately it was one of my cheaper versions. I will see you guys shortly, possibly after I've had a cup of coffee and warmed up. Ha 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 ha! There we have little Snake, who's been very patient whilst her dad's been doing some photography. You've been very patient, you really have. Dad says thank you very much.
Fuel, yeah?
Yeah, pump 4.
35 and 13 in a minute.
Yeah, perfect.
There you go.
Cheers, thank you very much, sir. Let's try and get a coffee to warm up. Well, we managed to find a coffee from a spa just at the side of the main road in Saltburn, and my cold hands are exceptionally thankful for this at this minute in time. Good. I'm hoping that we've got a few good shots from here. There's going to be a little bit of water spray to deal with, I think, in post-production. Just hoping that the lens hasn't smeared too much. When we were outside on that pier,
head west on Maskey Road towards
literally, you know, there was very little you could do. My hands were very cold, and it was so windy. Literally, you had to kind of keep hold of the tripod all the time, standing in front of it. The waves were really quite strong, and I'm quite a big guy. You know, I'm sort of 6'3" and 22, 23 stone, and it was really very difficult to actually stay kind of upright. So I'm hoping that they're okay, and we'll find out when we get them back and get them backed up, and have a little look in post-production.